think what's not talked about often is that men hurt too. Men hurt too. And we don't give them that choice. It's always my body, my choice. But it wasn't just my body, my choice when we were having sex. The Bible does say, let all the children come to me. And so when I think about it, I'm like, Lord, that baby is so much better off with you than it would have been with me. God brings beauty from ashes. And I believe that this is the story that I'm meant to share. When we are focusing on us, we tend to get in our own heads. But when we serve others, we realize how blessed we truly are.
Hi, and welcome to another episode and another season of the Woman Witness podcast on the Woman Witness TV network. On this podcast, we bring to you dynamic stories of faith, resilience, and transformation to empower you and strengthen you and inspire you on your journey with God, community, and family. Through each episode, we dive deep into the lives of incredible women who have faced challenges and embraced their calling and found courage to rise stronger. Here at The Well, we believe that every story is a testimony to God's goodness and His grace, and together we can grow, uplift each other, support one another. So join us every Monday as we share with you experiences and celebrate victories and lean into the power of faith that shapes the world around us and us. Today, I have an amazing guest, and I want to share her story, a resilient woman, a woman of faith that is going to share her story and share her walk with us. But before I introduce her, I want to go ahead and read a little bit about her. Today, I am going to introduce you to my special guest, Stacey Hernandez, a devoted wife and mother, and the mother of two adult children, who was born in Oakland, California, raised in the Bay Area. Coming from humble beginnings, Stacey had faced significant heartache, including becoming a teen mom, enduring heartbreak, and navigating painful experiences such as abortion, molestation, and a challenging upbringing. Despite these obstacles, she found the strength to rebuild her life. After her daughter graduated from high school, Stacey returned to college, where she attended classes with side by side. Stacey is passionate about helping and advising and supporting and nourishing the growth of young mothers, teens, and young adults. Reflecting on her own journey, Stacey believes that her insight and how to overcome these challenges through God's grace and God's guidance is going to be able to help pour into you today. So without further ado, I am so excited to introduce to you my guest today, Stacey Hernandez. Hey, Stacey, welcome to The Well.
Hi. Thank you. It's an honor, and I'm very blessed to be here today. Thank you for inviting me here.
I'm excited and thank you for coming on, and I'm excited to have you. We spoke a little bit before we pressed record, and I can tell you, I love your resiliency. I love the fact that you are becoming a witness and you're coming back and you're bringing your story to The Well, where other people, other women can lean in and find and see themselves through your story. And I can tell you, just before we even got started, I can attest to your story on so many different levels. And I love and I appreciate and I thank God for your willingness to come back and be a witness.
Thank you. And I just have to add that I love how you talk a lot about self-discovery and self-identity, because I feel like that's really critical to the growth with the Lord and being able to overcome. And so I'm very, very excited to be here today.
Thank you. And I'm excited to have you. Let's jump right in, Stacey. I know I introduced you a little bit and told a little bit about your background, but I want to start with your background on what was your early years like in growing up?
So my mom and dad my mom was from Mexico, came over when she was 8 years old. They both, ironically, come from a family of 12. My dad is white. His roots are from Alabama. They settled in LA. And then my mom came over, like I said, when she was 8. Eventually, they both landed in Hayward, California, which is a town right next to Oakland in the East Bay. They met. My mom was 13. My dad was 16. They got pregnant. My mom had an abortion before me, and then got pregnant with me. They were on welfare, got married when I was 8 months in the womb. So we were on welfare and public housing for a good portion of my childhood. So I remember moving often, and then they were managers in the public housing system. And so I just remember growing up, just in different housing projects and, just making a way. But what was really difficult for me early on was the earliest years that I remember is probably around 7 years old when my mom was an alcoholic. There was some marital things going on. My dad was trying to hold up the fort by working nights, and my mom was working days, and she just had like little jobs, like, crossing guard, working at thrift stores, places like that. Nothing really concrete, just something to help kind of supplement the income. So my dad, coming from a dysfunctional family, held so many different jobs. And so being on public housing was very concrete for them. But what was really difficult for me is, which really stems from a lot of my pain and overcoming and a lot of the wounds that have been really intricate and part of my dysfunction growing up and my relationship, my marriage, my parenting, all those things. And that was having to be a mom at 7, 8 years old, having to parent my parents, having to go chase my mom and go get her from that neighbor's house where she was drunk or flirting with other men. And I remember early on having stomach aches and not knowing why, and having to shelter my little brother from the truth of what was really happening and putting him to bed, and then having to go get my mom and then bring her home and her yell in my face and tell me, be quiet, you're not my parent, shut up, go do what you're supposed to do. And in fact, just to kind of hone in on that, one of your guests had talked about that too. And on one of the podcasts I was watching, and she was saying how you not to be heard, just to be seen. And I can totally resonate with that, because that was part of my culture. My mom, being Hispanic, and I know it's not just a Hispanic thing. It's sometimes it's just a parental thing. Like, I have a hierarchy, and you just do as I say, not do as I do. And I struggled with that because I was silenced, into my being able to speak my truth to my mom. They were eventually split up for a while, and then that was really difficult for me too, because it just catapulted me even more to those responsibilities and having to get my brother ready for school. And then my mom ended up working nights too. And so we had 2 parents working nights. And so just really having my childhood robbed was really difficult. And so that manifested into control as I got older. I wanted to be a control freak because I wanted to be able to have my safe space. I wanted to be able to know that I was in control, or I thought I was in control of my surroundings and what schedule was coming. In my early years, it was there was no structure. That it was, everything was a surprise, and it wasn't good surprises, and so that was very difficult.
Yeah. Thank you for setting that stage and giving us a good overview. Let me ask you, at what point, when like becoming a teen mom, how did that impact your life and the decisions moving forward?
So I met my husband when I was 17. Again, kind of going back, I had to get a job at 16 because I got tired at junior year. I got tired of my mom shopping at the thrift store for me. And it was embarrassing. In the 90s growing up, it was like everybody had these fashions, Z Cavaricis and IOU sweatshirts and Guess jeans. And it was like, who could afford Guess jeans at $60 when you're like on public housing, right? And I was like, I had to fake the funk. I was like, well, I'm still part of that crew, right?
Yeah.
So, borrowing clothes from friends just got old, and I got a job at the grocery store, and I was a bagger. And back then benefits were good, and part-time you could make, decent money. And so I met my husband in the grocery store parking lot at Lucky's at the time, and he's 6 years older than me. So I'm 17 and he was 23. And I think for me, it was like looking for foundation. It was looking for someone to push me. My mom my mom didn't graduate high school. She dropped out as a sophomore when she got pregnant with me. And so I think deep down, like there was some jealousy and she didn't want me to graduate. And so my husband now, which was my boyfriend then, pushed me. He was like, here's my car, drop me off at work, go to school. My mom was like, oh, you could sleep in, it's fine. So moving forward, I got pregnant with my daughter. But before I talk about that, I had an abortion before her. I got pregnant at, I want to say like a year after I met him. And he comes from an alcoholic background. And again, just me coming from an alcoholic mother and him coming from an alcoholic father, we had so much drama and trauma between us. And being 17, 18, I was a teen and I was rebellious and I was angry and I was controlling. And so I decided to have an abortion without telling him. And his mom doesn't speak English. She's from Mexico as well. And, and has been here her whole life, but she doesn't know the language here. And so someone had told her, I had told my friend to take me to the clinic but my friend was dating his cousin. And so my friend told his cousin, hey, I took Stacey today to the clinic. And we ended up, my boyfriend and I at the time, we show up at this quinceañera, which is a celebration for a 15-year-old girl. And somebody across the table said, oh, here comes the baby killers. Well, you have to remember that my husband, or my boyfriend then, didn't know that I had an abortion.
Oh, so
he had no idea. And his mom pulls him outside and tells him, hey, your girlfriend aborted your baby. And it just caused this, it was a whole deal. And that carried on for many, many years. And so it split us up for a little bit. Well, then we got back together about 6 months later and I got pregnant again.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, I can't go through what I went through. And it was, I think there was part of me, like I was careless, but I was also kind of seeking a redemption because I was so broken. Yeah. As twisted as it sounds, it was something where it was like, if it happens, it happens. Because I felt like I owed it to this unborn baby, and so I had my daughter and I was 19.
Yeah.
And we moved in. We waited till I was 8 months pregnant. We moved into an apartment. I was working full time as a secretary, and he was working nights. So it's like almost like history repeats itself. He's working nights, I'm working days, and so we had this baby, and a year into it, we split up again. So it was really hard because I had to move back in with my parents. So I'm going from one traumatic situation to another, and my parents, that didn't last long because my mother and I have never really had a really good relationship. And as I mentioned, she never really wanted me to graduate high school, and that's a whole nother story. But I moved back home and I had to pay rent. And so I started paying rent, and I was on welfare. Food stamps for my daughter because now we were in a child custody court battle. And it was really ugly. And it was hard. And here's the thing. Here's where I knew, I'm getting chills just sharing this. Yeah. Here's where I knew that God was in the middle, even in my rebellion, because I was out clubbing, taking flights to Cabo San Lucas, drinking, smoking. Yeah. I wasn't promiscuous because that was one thing. Just kind of going back into your first question, I was molested at 11 years old by my dad's brother, my uncle. And so I had to face him in court at 13. So I was very protective over my body when it came to not being out there. I was out there and I was flirty, but I was not out there, and I think that was God's protection almost. And so when we went to court, my mom was always asking me for rent. And so long story short, her and I had an argument and she kicked me out. So I had to sleep in the car with my daughter for 2 days. And I had to call in sick to work. I couldn't let my husband know because then the courts could have taken her from me.
Where was your dad at this moment, Stacey?
My dad?
Yeah.
He was with my mom, but he sided with her because.
Yeah, I get it. Yep. Okay.
And my brother, he was still at home. So my mom favored my brother like my whole life to this day. And so it's like been very, very challenging. I was the responsible one, always having to push forward where my brother was like coddled and protected. So I still had that chip on my shoulder for a long time. So I ended up going over to my deceased grandmother's house. my aunt who lived there, she was schizophrenic, and my cousin, her son that she had lived there along with my other cousin who was a single mom with 3 kids. And this is the house my mom grew up in. So mind you, it's an older home.
Yeah.
12 kids were raised in there. So I moved back into this house and I start paying rent there to my aunt, with my daughter. And my mom didn't even come looking for me. And so that was the challenges. It was like, okay, I got to play this cool. I got to continue to go to work. I got to be a mom. Luckily, a lot of this stuff happened when my daughter was like 2. But I want to go back really quick about God's provision and his protection.
Yeah.
So my daughter was born on time. In fact, tomorrow's her 27th birthday. So she was born on time.
Yeah.
Totally healthy, no problems. My pregnancy was completely flawless. Yeah. After I left my boyfriend, baby daddy at the time, my daughter was rushed to the hospital by ambulance for RSV.
Oh,
literally 13 months. So I left him a week after her first birthday and moved back home to my parents. She had gotten a cold. He was on probation at his new job. And this is back in the day when there was pagers, right? So there's no cell phone. So I'm blowing up his pager. And we're not on good terms, we're not on good terms. And so he's like, don't call me unless it has something to do with the baby. And I'm like, 911, 911. But he worked at a manufacturing plant. It was in Fremont. So it was called Numi. They made like Toyotas and Corollas. And so he couldn't get off the line just to call me. So he finally calls me and I'm like, hey, I'm in Hayward at this hospital. They think they're going to transfer me to Oakland Children's Hospital. Adriana's not doing well. She can't breathe, and they don't have the resources for pediatrics. So I'm going to be following the ambulance over to Oakland. And he's like, I'll meet you there when I get off at 2 a.m. I'm like, all right, cool. So that was the beginning of God's provision, because he was teaching us a lesson. We were both in other relationships at this time. We were already seeing other people, clubbing, doing our thing. And we could not, we despised each other. So this was like really like bringing 2 enemies together for the greater good.
For the greater good.
Yeah. And she was in the hospital for, I want to say every 6 to 9 weeks. Every time an inkling of the season change or someone sneezed on her, it was like it would start with a cold and it would go into her lungs and they'd have to pump her full of oxygen and prednisone. And we spent there. Santa Claus, the Raiders came in one season, gave her gifts. I mean, it was tumultuous, and we never left her at the hospital. So now you had to bring 2 people that don't like each other, plus their parents, and say, hey, I'm going to go home and take a shower. He's going to work. He's nights. I'm going to work on days. He's going to go sleep for 2 hours. I'm going to go take a shower. Okay, so we had this whole family affair system going on when everybody did not like each other. But we made it work. And even still then, being, 21 years old, I still did not see what God was doing. I was so prideful and so angry and so controlling. So I look back at that, and that was the beginning of a very difficult journey of parenting.
Oh my goodness. Stacey, you shared so much, and thank you so much for sharing that all with us. If you don't mind, I want to go back to something that you said, and you said a lot, but I want to try to tackle each one. And I believe that this one is so important, especially nowadays with everything going on. And, I want to talk about when you said that you had your abortion.
Yeah.
And then I think you said before even your mom had one too, right? Right before you. And I want to talk about the emotions that you face dealing with that. And I kind of heard you, take a lot of the guilt on. And I want to talk to you about that, because I think there's more to it than that. And I want you to especially speak this just put it out there for anyone who is listening who may have had abortions themselves and maybe carry around that guilt and that burden and that regret. I want you to talk to us about what was going through your mind at the time. I know you were young, but talk to us about some of the challenges that you faced during and after.
I think the main thing was in the beginning was, we get in these relationships where we think, oh, if I just have his baby, that he's going to stick around. And that was kind of, I think part of that, in truth be told, I think a lot of that was that, being 17 and having parents who were so dysfunctional, coming from a very tumultuous home, right? And he was giving me some consistency. So he was making sure I was getting to and from work safely. He was making sure that, he was making sure I was going to school. But when I got down the nitty gritty and saw that he had an alcoholism problem and he was not who he was from the very start. So he had a really good thing about him about support and love and caring, but he also had a selfishness and
Yeah.
a lot of generational curse from his father's side.
Mm.
So I was trying to protect myself. I woke up one day and I was like, you know what, I can't do. What really stemmed that was we had a really bad fall and we had a really big fight one night. It was like borderline DV. And he grabbed me by my throat, and he's never hit me, but he grabbed me by my throat, and he was very drunk, and he had smoked a couple joints, and he was with all of his friends, and we were outside arguing, and I was like, you need to stop drinking. And he like kind of pushed me up against the wall, and he's like, you're not going to tell me what to do, with some other, choice words. And I was like, okay, well, you're not going to tell me what to do, but I know what I'm going to do, and I thought, I can't bring my kid up in this environment that I grew up in. And what is that going to look like? I'm going to bring this kid up that's going to go through what I went through. And I have all these issues, right?
Yeah.
So it's not fair for me. And I can't even believe I was thinking like that as a
I
17,
know.
18 years old.
I'm like, I'm just blown away with your maturity at that level, at that point.
I just, again, it's like being that parent, right? That I never really had my childhood. I was always forward thinking. It was like over analytical, which, that's a good and a bad thing. Yeah. But when I finally made the decision, Planned Parenthood was not turning me away. And there was nobody there. I really didn't have, and that's what goes back to like being a solid parent. I couldn't go to my mom and say, hey, I'm about to make this decision. Yeah. I didn't have any pseudo mothers or sisters that I could go and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. It was more of like people saw me as this pillar of strength all the time. And I was very like, hey, I'm matter of fact, I don't care what you say or what you think. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. They saw me as a strong-willed person when deep down inside I was broken and hurt and I'm really soft. But I've always had to be that fighter. And so I was making this executive decision with no one to kind of say, hey, let me be devil's advocate for a second. What does that other side of that coin look like? So when I made the appointment, I just told my friend, I said, I need a ride. And she didn't even question me. She was like, okay, well, when do I pick you up? And so I went through it. And what's crazy is I remember arriving to the clinic. I remember going inside. I remember filling out the paperwork. I don't remember the procedure. I don't remember the procedure. I remember leaving. I remember going. I don't remember anything after I get home. I remember just resting and being alone because my mom didn't know. My mom didn't know. My dad didn't know. Nobody knew. Just that one friend who actually, not by her fault. She shared it with her boyfriend who shared it with my whole in-laws. Yeah. But, I suppressed it for so long. I hid it away. And I think focusing more on what I did, like neener. Now, I'm in control. You didn't have a say. I'm a big girl. I got this. It didn't even affect me until I had my daughter. And then I was like, okay, this is what happened. I got rid of somebody else that could have been here. And then
And you were still young at that point, Stacey.
I was 19. I was actually, to be honest, it was, I gave birth to her 2 weeks exactly after my 20th birthday. So I went through this whole time of her being a baby, focusing on her. So that other baby was non-existent anymore. It was just faded in the sunset. It was a done deal. That was a wrap. It came full circle in 2020 because I have a son. I have a son, and he's graduated now. He's going to be 20 in October, and I was so busy being a mom and chasing their dreams with them and supporting them and being everything that my mom wasn't all these years. So you're going from 1997 to now, where are we at? 2024, right? 2020, really 2023 is when he graduated. So I'm going all these years of just being this person that I always needed and that I always wanted, being the best version that possibly I could myself. And I've made lots of mistakes, but just really focusing on that. Yeah. Well, when 2020 happened, we were locked down. Yeah. And I had a lot of time between work and just being home. And now my kids are they're doing their own thing. There's adults, they're doing their own thing. And my son's getting ready to graduate high school. He's a sophomore at the time.
Yeah.
And what happened was I had heard this podcast about abortion, and it hit me like a ton of bricks, and realizing that I was no longer going to have this responsibility of chasing after these kids anymore. And I was stuck staring
Having to
myself
deal
in the
with it.
face, and this stillness and this quietness. Well, I met this lady on Instagram, and her and I are now friends today. We've never even met, but we're like best friends on Instagram. And that's what I love about social media,
That's
right?
yeah.
But she introduced me to this Bible study called Surrendering the Secret.
Mm.
And girl, let me tell you, that changed my whole world. I mean,
Really?
so I speak to the audience today that if you are dealing with trauma or regret, that study, it's not for the weary. It's something that is going to be it's basically tearing you down and building you back up, but it reminds you of God's grace and his mercy. And I had to go through this study. It's rough, and it was 4 of us. We were on Zoom because of the lockdowns, but we had to name our baby. We had to name our baby. We had to go through a very, very detailed, descriptive, everything you just asked me. What do I remember? What did I do when I was hurting from it? How did I act out? We all react different ways and do things differently based on our pain and our hurt.
Yeah.
And I had suppressed it for so long because I thought I was tough. When in reality, when it got quiet and I wasn't distracted anymore, God is like, okay, now she's
Now
ready.
deal with it.
Now she's ready.
Gosh.
So it took me 25, 23, somewhere around there, 20 something years to face the music.
Describe that part when you said you had to deal with it. Talk to us about what is okay. What is realistically the amount of time that it can take one to deal with it and move forward and get through it?
It's, I think everybody's different. For me, I knew it was something I had to, and it was like a 6-week process to get through it. And I'm going to be honest. There's been times where I still have moments where I'm in the car, I'm driving to work, and something will come up, or, I remember the baby's birthday. It was supposed to be Cinco de Mayo. So Cinco de Mayo is very difficult for me. I mean, I don't retreat or, drink my life away or anything like that. But I honor that day, and I'm like, and to myself, and I've had to apologize to my husband, because I think what's not talked about often is that men hurt too. And we don't give them that choice.
Oh, I'm getting chills.
It's always my body, my choice. But it wasn't just my body, my choice when we were having sex. It wasn't just my body, my choice when we were engaging in, dating and courting and all those things. It took 2. So just like I needed that other person to talk to me and maybe talk me out of it, I didn't have that person. It's the same way when a woman should talk to their significant other and say, hey, here's my thoughts, here's my fears. And it's not always easy, because sometimes, just like with me, he was an alcoholic at the time. And I was too young and immature to even like consider or consult with him. And I don't even know what the conversation would have looked like in hindsight, because of our mindset and where we were. We weren't Christians. We weren't believers. We weren't honoring God. We were honoring ourselves. We were doing us. But doing us had high consequences. And it's something that, what really what brought me out of that was really realizing that these women, people get online and they're like, oh, I'm unfazed, and I'm like, give it time. Because at the end of the day, it's still murder. It's still murder. You're taking someone's life. It's scientifically, it's been proven that the heartbeat is almost immediate after we're conceived, within a matter of days. So to watch those things, I've watched videos of the conception, and that's been part of my healing. Naming the baby has been part of my healing. And here's the thing. The Bible does say, let all the children come to me. And so when I think about it, I'm like, Lord, that baby is so much better off with you then it would have been with me. And who knows where we would have been at that time if I would have, and I'm not making excuses, because if I could go back in time, that baby would be right here, right now. But God brings beauty from ashes.
Yeah.
And I believe that this is the story that I'm meant to share. But I wasn't ready in my 20s. I wasn't ready in my 30s. It took me a whole 2 lifetimes of parenting 2 young adults, a boy and a girl, where I was blessed. And to be
Yes.
able to see the contrast of both,
Yeah.
and the ebbs and the flows of that journey. And now being able to say, okay, I'm ready to heal and I'm ready to tell my story. Because often, especially in Hispanic culture, I know I can only speak on my culture.
Yeah.
It's something that you hide. It's something that you
Shame.
don't talk
Yeah.
about. It's
Yeah.
shame. It's, you don't, it's taboo.
Yeah.
It's taboo to even talk about sex, and it needs to be talked about.
Yes.
I have
Absolutely.
spoken, I have told my kids everything. I'm an open book. And I think that's my daughter has broken the cycle. Like I said, she'll be
Thank you,
27
Jesus.
tomorrow,
Yes.
and she doesn't have children. She hasn't had an abortion. I've been very frank with them, because I want them to break that chain. I want them to break that cycle, that generational curse,
Yeah.
and to God be the glory.
Yes. I love what you just said. It's going to lead me into my next question. You said that your daughter is breaking the cycle. She is setting forth a new step forward for the next generation, right?
Yeah.
And I want to talk to you about when you said that you've always sought out mother figures. You wrote in at the beginning, you always sought out mother figures, and you became that mother that you wanted. I want you to talk to me, because you said it several different times. I want you to talk to some of us who feel like we always have to be that strong woman and that strong person and take on the weight of the world without letting ourselves feel or heal. Talk to some of us about that. But before you do, can I just ask you, was that some of the things was that strength is what kept you from sharing, or did you share with your parents about the molestation that happened to you? Was some of that strength that made you kind of bottle it and try to take it on?
I actually ended up having to share with my parents, because the uncle that molested me had several other child molestation cases from the Bay Area to LA. And so when I finally told them about it a year later and they did an investigation, they found out that he was in LA in prison for oral copulation on a 13-year-old boy.
Oh,
So they had to actually extradite him back to the Bay Area, and I had to face him in court at the age of 13. And the incident happened at 11, when I was 11. So I had to
oh,
face him in court, and that was another traumatizing event for me, because I was coached by the investigators and the detectives on what to say, and having to look him straight in the face, him being on the other side of the courtroom and looking at him. And so that was like really pivotal for me. That actually was a blessing in disguise, because what it made me realize is that I actually had a voice, and
oh,
that I could speak on pain, and I could speak on things that are hurtful,
yeah,
instead of keeping it inside, because then that manifests into deeper, darker things, right?
yeah.
So,
So you didn't have to keep that bottled in and try to be strong. You were able to let that go immediately and say, hey, this is what's
yes,
happening to me.
yes.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Now talk to us about how that transitioned into you in this strong armor, this protection that you begin to move forward with in life.
So I think, like, in terms of that, it was really more of like ebbing and flowing with the Lord, right? So I had to finally get to a place of, it's not my strength anymore. I had to, and that goes back to when my husband and I actually finally got back together after the breakup.
Yeah.
I went to the club on Saturday, and then I went to church on Sunday.
Hey, we all been there.
so so I ended up going up to the pastor, because there was like this altar call, and I remember going up to him and I was like, hey, can I meet with you? And he was like, sure. So I went in, and I just let it all out. And
Really?
he was like, well, can you get him here? And I was like, no, he is diehard Catholic. He will not step foot in a Christian church, like, no. And he's like, just get him here. And he's like, just find a way to get him here. And I was like, all right. So I get him there, and we start working through our problems and counseling with this pastor. And so that was like the beginning of learning that my strength was not in me, and it was in the Lord, and how
Mm,
to transfer that strength from myself to him. And of course, along the way, I've fallen on my face and picked myself back up and refer back to his word. But what I realized is part of it was trusting in him. And a lot of the times is getting out of my own will. I've been in my own way for so long, thinking that it was my strength, when really over and over again, it's really been about him, And so part of that strength comes from getting out of my head, getting into his word, surrounding myself with those other women. I was searching for pseudo women, pseudo mothers, pseudo sisters. But let's face it, the Bible says men will let us down.
Yeah.
God is there. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever.
Yeah.
And so that was something I had to be reminded of. And so what I started doing is getting myself involved in, because a lot of times you don't want to get into these groups. There's drama everywhere. Church is not excluded.
Yeah.
But I think really staying in prayer and saying, Lord, lead me to the right people. Take me where I need to be. Place me there. I believe in divine appointments. I believe in those connections, because there's always something that we have to offer each other. Some days I'm weak and I'll call a sister up and I'm like, hey, I need prayer. And she's like, remember who you are in the Lord. And by the time I'm off the conversation, I'm like, you know what? This is small potatoes compared to what I've been through. Right. But I proclaim and prepare his truth, prepare my mind for his truths and proclaim his promises. I speak it. And I did start a war room. I did start a war room. I have a prayer closet, and I have a whiteboard where I have verses that I remind myself, and I get involved. I get involved in women's groups. I get involved with other believers, and the other thing that I've always remind myself, it's an acronym for SELF, and it's serve, empower, love, and fellowship. When we are focusing on us, we tend to get in our own heads, but when we serve others, we realize how blessed we truly are. And even, my story is not exclusive. There's nothing special about it. It just means that I've gone through trials just like everybody else. But what I love is knowing that I can call someone like you and be like, hey, I'm going through this. And you're like, hey, I can relate. Just kind of like we started our conversation. Yes. Or watching these podcasts that you have here is seeing every single woman of your podcast that I've watched. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's preaching gospel. It's true, and we need to talk about this stuff more because sometimes we isolate ourselves and we think that we're alone. And you had another lady, I think it was Kalisha Wilson, and she was like, I couldn't get out of bed, and I was like, oh, are you sure? You're not me, and me, like, because there's been those days where I'm like, Lord, really? Who am I? What am I doing here? What's my purpose? Like, I've cried out to him. But it goes back to me stopping focusing on me and keeping my eyes to him. And so that's and checking your heart. What is we have to check our heart. I've had to check my heart many times. Sometimes I get so engrossed in like what it's about me. But so that's and then one more thing is that reminds me is that Psalm 71:18. If you look at that verse, it talks about how we have a story to tell, and I remind myself of some of those times of those verses of like, I have a story to tell. God, there's a purpose. There's a purpose in my pain, and that's what keeps me strong.
Psalm 71:18.
Would you like me to read it too?
Come on, yes, please.
All right, let me do that. Let's do that. Yes, it's pretty powerful, and it was shared to me in one of my women's groups. It says, even when I am old and gray, do not forsake me, my God, till I declare your power to the next generation, your mighty acts to all who are to come. So as we get old and gray, we have a story to tell. And it's not in vain.
Oh, that's it. Oh, that gives chills. It really brings tears to my eyes because it's a testament to what we've been talking about this whole entire time. It's about breaking generational curses and setting up and reminding our next generation of women, of children, of daughters and sons that generational blessings are yours.
Yes.
It is yours. That is your inheritance.
Yes.
And it's up to us to tell our stories.
Yes.
Oh
Yes.
man, that just did something. That makes me literally want to just pull out. Hold on, wait. Listen, I can do a whole thing on this. This was good.
Yeah.
Isn't that when oh when Moses took the children out of Egypt, what were they supposed to do? Every year they're supposed to tell the story of how God
Yes.
freed them.
Exactly.
Why? So they don't forget.
And they did. They looked at themselves instead of his promises, and
Mm,
it kept them stagnant for what, another 40 years. I
yep,
mean,
yep.
and
Come on.
Jesus tells us to believe. I mean, he talks to doubting Thomas and John, and he
Yeah,
says, look at my hands. He had to show him because he was doubting him, but he says, you must believe.
you got to believe.
And that's what I love about John 20 as well, is he reminds us that we are going to doubt. We're human,
Yeah,
but we have to believe.
yeah.
And I've seen I've seen his mercies and his grace through the years over and over and over again.
Yes. Okay, our stories are that is good. Okay, I want you to talk to us about healing. Give us something to take with us about this faith and this spirituality and this healing process. For those who feel like, you know what, I've done too much. Stacey, there's no way in the world that God can forgive me. There's no way in the world that I can forgive myself. I can't move on. Talk to us about the healing process. How can we begin to take those steps forward?
Well, first and foremost, I think reflection. One thing that I had to do in the healing process was ask myself why I'm doing these things, why I'm feeling this way. And it goes back to my childhood. A lot of the wounds, a lot of the reactions and behaviors was based on things that I didn't recognize or point out or even acknowledge. And that was the wounds of my father, my mother. It says that in the Bible too. We should be praying for our children and our children's children.
Mm,
I
mm,
don't think that my grandparents and my great grandparents were praying for us. And so, therefore, the generational curses have repeated themselves. I got saved at 10, not knowing when my parents were drunk and hungover. I was going to Bible study by someone who was driving around in a car, picking up kids in the neighborhood, taking them to Bible study, to Sunday school.
wow.
So for me, it's really identifying myself in Christ first and foremost, remembering that I'm his child, I'm his daughter, I'm a daughter of the King.
Yes.
And he has, and when you look at reflection and you ask yourself, how many times has miracles happened? Things that have come along, you're like, I should have been dead,
I shouldn't be
or
here.
I shouldn't be here. Why
Mm,
shouldn't you be here? And why are you still here? Because
mm.
God has a purpose for you. You have to remember he knit you in your mother's womb. He knew you. He called you by name. So you're not here. The scars that we have are from sinful nature of our ancestors, our parents,
Mm,
generations before us. So we're not going to be excluded from the pain and the hurt, but it's our job to remember God's promises, proclaim those promises, declare those promises, declare defeat, know who our enemy is, and defeating him. How do we defeat him? Prayer, fellowship, reading the word, getting into podcasts. I just want to share. I'm not an author, but I'm working on a book right now, and I'm working on my own podcast actually.
yes.
But Women Who Spark, this is a really good resource.
Mm,
This will help women. It's 12 steps to catapult happiness, cultivate confidence, and discover purpose in your life. It's down to things like, as you just
yeah.
asked, how can you find and get over those things and hurts and pains? Getting involved with other believers, serving. When
Yeah.
you serve, God blesses you in miraculous ways. There's been times I'm like, God, I don't want to. I don't want to. But now I'm involved in the youth ministry. I just signed up for a community center for high school kids who come from broken homes, gangbangers, to talk to them.
Yeah.
And we need to pour into this next generation because there's a lot of Stacys out there that are 17 that are contemplating abortion.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Stacys out there that have gotten hooked up with a guy who likes to drink and likes to smoke, but wants to
Mm,
hold on to him because my home is broken at home. There's a lot of those out there.
yeah.
And part of my healing, part of overcoming is remembering where I came from and where I am now and where I still have to come, because I'm never going to arrive. But as
Yes.
long as I stay true to his word, as long as I stay
Mm,
true to him and drown out the noise, get
yes.
out of your head and get into the word, and
Mm,
check your heart posture. You got to check your heart posture. What are you at? Are you consuming? Are you contributing? What's the other side of sacrifice? Breakthrough. If
mm.
we sacrifice for him, we're going to get breakthrough. And it took me a long time to realize that. So that's been my, my supplement to everything that I've gone through.
Yeah.
And I'm still on that journey. I'm
Yeah.
still on that journey, but surround yourself with a lot of good women, a
That's
lot
it.
of good women. And the way too is our pride has to be broken. You
Yeah.
have to be willing to, you have to be vulnerable. And I learned that going to women's Bible study groups, women's growth groups in my church.
Mhm.
And it's not for everybody. I mean, there's been ones I've walked in there and I'm like, oh Lord, like, no,
Can't be if
this
you
is
want.
okay. I'm here for a reason. What am I here for? And
Mm.
I'll tell you, I walked into one room and there was like 65 and over. And I was
Oh,
like, okay. And
yeah.
I was the youngest one. I was like, I'll tell you, that was the best group. I walked out of there with so much information,
Oh, I bet you did.
experience, stuff that I don't have to go through because they shared stuff. And I'm like, oh, Lord, that's a word, So it's
Yeah, that's it
the
right there.
Proverbs 31 woman tells us that the older women are supposed to teach the younger women.
My God.
We have a job and a purpose. And that's what I keep myself reminded of.
Oh, I love that so much. You listen, Stacey, we can sit here and do a whole other podcast episode about that
Yeah.
because I am so passionate about that. I think only when we get to a certain age or a certain point in our life where we feel that we may have arrived, that we
Yeah.
forget about our past. And
Right.
then so sometimes we enter relationships and new encounters with sisters who just really need you to just see them for who they are, not
Mm-hmm.
what they have on, not how their hair is, not what their makeup look like, but just to see them.
Right.
And I remember that. I have to continue to always remember that. Lord knows I ain't arrived, but but I'm on my
I'm with
way.
you. I'm with you.
I'm on my way and I can never forget. God, Lord, he just won't let me forget. Okay. let me ask you, where do you see your ministry in the I don't like saying a lot of years. So I'm going to say in the next 2 years. Where do you see your ministry, Stacey?
Well, I currently work for a law enforcement agency in a clerical position, and I've been applying for other jobs to get out, and God will not let me get past these interviews. I mean, interview after interview after interview, and I'm like, okay, God, there's a purpose. So I think He's keeping me there for a reason. I don't know what that is yet. I'm still seeking His will, but in the process, because I have tenure with the agency, it gives me a lot of free time, and I have a lot of time on the books for vacation. With that said, I did intern for Jamie Ivey, the Christian author. I don't know if you know who she is.
Oh,
She's got her own podcast as well, and I did intern for her last year for her podcast. So I learned a lot behind the scenes of podcasting and media packets and that type of thing. So my goal, where I see myself, is starting on my own podcast, and I'm praying about that as well.
mm,
And I'm also, like I said, I'm in the middle of writing a book right now, and I started a Instagram page called Pivotal Prayers,
mhm.
and so I really want to be that person that is going to be assisting other women in their pain to progress in the Lord. And so that's in the next 2 years. That's my goal, is to have that podcast up and running and to be a resource for women and young mothers, because there needs to be a system in place. Our system is so broken, and there has to be support out there, more resources. And so that's who knows, maybe a nonprofit. I don't know. We'll see. So
Oh man, I'm all over that. When you're talking, Stacey, I just hear midwives, and I think that there's is so pivotal, so important right now that a lot of us hear that call and don't walk away, don't turn your head to it, don't feel that you are not deserving, or you don't know
right.
enough, you don't have enough, or you don't know the Lord enough. You have to start walking in that
Yes.
in that calling.
Yes.
So I love that, Stacey. I love that for you. Um,
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'll receive that in the name of Jesus.
Love that for you. Okay, Stacey, let me give you back the floor. I have kept you long enough. I need to have you back because I didn't even get through half of what I really wanted to talk about. But God, thank you.
Thank you.
Leave us with something. If I want you to give us a soundbite of this conversation, give the women something to take with them throughout the week.
I just want you to remind yourself that you are a child of God, and you're someone's blessing. You may not know that right now, but I'm going to get emotional. You are chosen, and there is a purpose for your pain. We all have a calling, and I want you to step into that calling. Don't reflect on the pain that in a negative way. Remember that God is walking alongside you. Envision him walking alongside you because when you are weak, he is strong. So I want to leave you with that. Be still and know that he is God. Get in your quiet place. That's what I had to do. Get in your quiet place. If it's in a closet, if it's in your car, if it's in a bedroom, if it's in your backyard, go out there and just talk to him. Release everything to him and let him walk alongside you. Let him be in control. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
I know. I can't
I
respond right
wasn't ready for
now.
that one.
Okay. Woo. Okay, Stacey, that was amazing.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for your time. Thank you for coming and being vulnerable. Thank you for pouring at this well. I'm going to
Thank
tell you,
you.
I love finishing a conversation and feeling so full. And I believe that's what it's all about. It's all about telling your story, being a witness. Psalms 7, tell us again, Psalms 21:17.
No, I wrote it down. It's Psalms 71:18.
Goodness, Psalm 71:18.
Yeah.
We all have a story to tell. And I hate to give you all this burden leaving here, but it is up to you to tell it.
Yes.
Ask
Yes.
God to help you to tell it. Start writing it, journaling it, but don't, as Stacey said, don't keep it to yourself. Go out there, talk to God in your quiet places. He will help you through it. I love this conversation so much. And if anyone listening to this was blessed by it, we ask that you take it. We ask that you share. We ask that you subscribe, like, follow Stacey on all social media. Stacey, tell us where we can find you.
So I'm on Instagram right now. It's pivotal_prayers. So I just started that, and then I don't want to release the name of my book yet, but as soon as I will update you, and then you can share it at that time, or maybe I could be a guest again and share that too.
Oh,
So
that'd be great. We would love to have you come back and talk to us about that. And by the
thank you.
time season 3 airs, hopefully you'll be done. So,
Yes, yes, amen. I'm going to receive that too. Thank
yes.
you.
So it'll start next year. So you have a 4 months. So you have
Yes.
time. Not
Hey, one of your speakers wrote it her book in 7 days. So
Yes, she did.
she gave me
Yes.
a run for my money.
Yes, she did.
I was like, oh,
So
what am I doing?
yes, so it can happen.
Yeah.
Okay, Stacey, thank you so much for joining
Thank
us.
you.
Thank
Be
you.
blessed. Be
Thank
blessed.
you. And
Thank you.
ladies, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Woman Witness Podcast of Stories at the Well. I'm your host, Leah Fortier. Perhaps you were chosen for such a time as this to write, to tell your story, your truth. Until next time.